From weird sightings to weird people, hitchhiking is a very dangerous activity, as you never know who you're letting into your car. My name is Ryan and welcome to Creep Source. I was driving through rural New Jersey when I saw him, a hitchhiker, standing by the side of the road, surprisingly well dressed, black suit, slicked black hair, narrow briefcase. Now, I know I shouldn't be picking up hitchhikers, but I'm 6'4", 230 pounds with all kinds of hunting equipment in the back of my truck. It's not like this prissy ass businessman is going to beat me to death and leave me on the side of the road. Besides, I need gas money. "Hey man," I said, pulling over to the side of the road. "I'll give you a lift if you pay me for gas." "Of course," he said in a polite, almost British accent. He reached for his wallet and pulled out 3 crisp $20 bills. "Is this enough?" I grinned. "That's way more than enough." I greedily snatched the money out of his hand and clicked the locks. "Get in, bud." He climbed in. His blue eyes shifted from the crumpled Wendy's wrapper on the dashboard to the mysterious sticky goo on the middle console. "Sorry, the car's not clean. I'm going hunting," I said, turning back onto the highway. "Hunting? Interesting," he said in a strangely enthusiastic tone. "Do you always like to hunt?" "No, it's the funniest thing. Never thought I'd ever hunt. I love animals. Got 3 dogs at home. But there are so many deer around these parts. When the winter comes, a lot of them starve to death. Not to mention all the car accidents they cause." I trailed off, and we fell into uncomfortable silence. "Just hunting for the day then?" "No, my buddy Matt and I will be out there the whole weekend." He let out a laugh. "The whole weekend? Your wife's a saint for letting you go." "My wife? How did he..." But then my eyes fell on the steering wheel and the silver ring on my finger. Yeah, Mary's a doll. She's actually pregnant. 5 months with a little girl." He gave me a crooked smile. "A girl, huh?" "Yeah." I could feel him staring at me long after we had fallen into silence. He made me feel uncomfortable. I clicked on the radio. "How did you meet Matt?" he asked, fiddling with the dial. All that came through was static. That's a weird question, I thought. He and Mary were close friends, so when we married, I got to know him well." "Mm-hmm," the man said. He stroked his chin thoughtfully, and I was suddenly reminded of a psychiatrist. "Are you a psychiatrist?" I blurted out. He laughed. "Definitely not. I work in finance." "What type of finance?" It was my turn to ask the questions now. "Futures," he replied, non-committally. I glanced over at him. A small smile was on his lips, and I noticed his fingers had gravitated from his lap to the briefcase at his feet. My heart began to pound. He undid the clasps. The case creaked open. "What's in the briefcase?" I asked. "Work." "What kind of..." His lost fingers disappeared into the darkness of the case. He was pulling something out. My body began to seize up. The steering wheel felt like ice under my fingers. "I have a lot of hunting equipment back there," I said. "So you better not..." I stopped. He was only pulling out a sheet of paper. For a few minutes he was quiet, reading the paper, intently and silently, as if his life depended on it. His fingers slid over it as they traced the text. Then he slipped it back into the case and snapped it shut. What was he reading? I thought. But before I could get the question out, he turned towards me. I could barely see his face in my peripheral vision, but I knew he was staring at me for minutes on end. Then he broke the silence. "Don't go hunting," he said, his ice blue eyes boring into me. "What?" "Turn the car around. Go home to Mary." "You what?" "She needs you," he paused. "Madeline needs you." I paled. I never told him we were going to name our baby Madeline. "How did you..." "He's going to make it look like an accident," he said, his voice gravelly and halting. "Just a simple hunting accident. The most punishment he'll endure is 35 minutes in the police station, writing out his statement. But let me off at that diner up ahead. I like their Cobb salad very much." "Matt's going to kill me? What are you talking about?" He turned to me, eyes wide. "What are you talking about?" "About what you just said." "All I said is I'd like you to let me off at the diner, please." He pointed to the exit curving off the highway. "You're going to miss it if you don't slow down." With a shaking hand, I clicked on my blinker, pulled off the exit into the parking lot, my heart pounding in time with the cooling engine. "Thank you for the ride," he said, pulling his briefcase out with him. "Have a good drive, will you?" I couldn't squeak out a reply before the door slammed shut. I didn't believe him, but my nerves were too shot to continue the trip. I texted Matt that I was sick, turned around and went home to Mary. Mary was thrilled. Matt was disappointed. A little too disappointed, if you ask me. A month later, after ignoring most of Matt's calls and texts, which became increasingly frequent and desperate, I heard a faint thumping noise at the door. When I flicked on the porch light, there was Matt, hunched over our doorknob, holding a lockpick. We called the police. Since then, life has been great. Just a few months later, our wonderful little Madeline was born, and as soon as we got back from the hospital, on our doorstep was a little teddy bear, a pink bow sewed onto its head. There wasn't a return address or a card of any kind, but I think I know who it was from. What the hell was she doing out here at a time like this? I eased my foot down onto the brake pedal, and the car slowed to a stop. I looked out the window at the woman. She cut a pitiful figure, shoulders slumped, head down, all while the rain poured down on her in heavy sheets. I rolled down the window. "Looking for a ride?" I asked. She lifted her head and nodded. I undid my seatbelt with a click, leaned over and opened the passenger side door. She climbed inside and brushed her soaking wet hair out of her face. She was beautiful. "Where you headed?" I asked.
"Oh,"
she said quietly.
"To hell, I guess."
I laughed at the perceived joke, but my laughter died when I saw the grave expression on her face. "Well," I said, "I can get you as far as Los Angeles. I guess that's about as close to hell as you can get without dying." Her face eased into a wry smile.
"Okay,"
she said.
"Los Angeles it is."
I smiled at her and hit the gas. Silence settled over us and we drove, and the rain came down heavier and heavier. Even with the wipers on full speed, it was impossible to see through the endless grey curtain of water. "So what brings you out here in weather like this?" I finally said. She looked a bit startled as she stared out the truck's windshield.
"Oh,"
she said.
"I hate the rain."
"Yeah," I said. "It's a good thing I found you when I did. The area is prone to flash floods, you know." A convulsive shiver shook her entire body. I cranked up the heat. "Hey, not to sound like a pervert, but shouldn't you get out of those wet clothes? I have some spare dry ones in the back."
"Okay,"
she said. She pulled her coat and shirt off right then, before reaching in the back and grabbing an old t-shirt I kept as a spare in the back. "Oh my god," I said. Now that her coat was off, I could see her neck. A thick purple bruise encircled it. She looked like she had been strangled. "Are you okay?" I asked. "Do you need medical attention?"
"Ambulances don't come out here."
she said.
"Same for police. It's too remote."
Right," I said. This woman was starting to make me feel uncomfortable, and our conversation once again faded into silence. It was a few minutes before she spoke again, right as the car was about to crest a large hill.
"Stop the car."
she said. I slowed but didn't stop. "What's the matter?" I asked.
"Stop the car."
"I can't do that," I said. "I'm on a tight schedule, you know, and besides, I can't just leave you out here in this weather." She turned to me. The look on her face was totally blank as she seized the wheel and pulled. The truck jerked to the right and tires squealed as I slammed on the brakes. I jerked the wheel back, but it was no good. The truck slammed into the guardrail, shearing off a post and plunging into slushy mud. "God damn it!" I yelled. "What the hell is wrong with you? What the hell?" The woman had disappeared. I squinted out the window into the shifting grey canvas of rain. Had she somehow fallen out while the car was skidding? I looked at her seatbelt, still buckled. This was too weird for me. I hit the gas, but the truck's wheels only spun. I was stuck. I pulled out my phone and called the police to let them know where I was, but they said they couldn't reach me until weather conditions improved. I resigned myself to waiting, flipped on the radio and took a nap. I awoke to a knock on my window. I opened my eyes to see a policeman motioning me to roll down the windows. I obliged. "Well," he said in a thick southern drawl, "believe it or not, you might just be the luckiest son of a gun on the planet." "Excuse me?" "Come on out, I'll show you." I did as I was told, and the two of us walked to the top of the hill. Lying in the middle of the road below, lodged in a massive swell of mud, was a rock about half the size of my truck. "Come over there, hill," said the policeman. "I reckon you never would have seen it in the rain. It's a lucky thing you lost control when you did, otherwise, well..." He looked at me pointedly. "But I didn't lose control," I said. "This woman I picked up, a hitchhiker, she jerked the wheel and sent me into the mud." "They're right," he said. "Where'd she go?" "She, disappeared." A peculiar expression stole over his face. "You remember what she looked like?" Yeah," I said. "Black hair, blue eyes, and what?" "A bruise around her neck. It was a bad one." The police nodded and sighed. "Looks like you ran into old Maggie. She's a local legend around here." "Legend?" The officer nodded and explained. Apparently Maggie was a single mother who had locked her daughter in her room in order to keep the girl from running off with an abusive boyfriend. She went off to work and left her daughter taking the key with her. It rained hard that day and the house was flooded. The daughter couldn't get out and drowned. Maggie was inconsolable. She hung herself a week later. Her note said that she was going to hell to atone for her sins. But she didn't go to hell. According to legend, she stayed on Earth to atone by saving wayward travellers from the same fate her daughter had suffered. I suppose I might have bumped my head in the crash, that Maggie might have been nothing more than a hallucination, except for one thing. When I went back to my truck, the shirt and jacket she'd been wearing were sitting there still, soaking wet, on my passenger seat. I still have them. Driving through the backwoods of eastern Kentucky in the dead of night is the most terrifying thing I've ever done. Anyone who's ever been in the area knows exactly what I'm talking about. All the light from the moon and the stars is blocked by thick vegetation and hills, so it's pitch black. There's history in those hills, a lot of history, and this energy fills the place with this crazy bad vibe. It's like the very land is pissed at you, like it wants you dead. The roads aren't well travelled, and you'll be hard pressed to see a single car driving down them at night. Cool service out there is, at least for me, spotty at best, non-existent at worst, and you pray to whatever you believe in that your car doesn't break down, knowing full well the folks who live smattered across the hills are isolated private people, and that they wouldn't be very happy seeing you wandering onto their property in the dead of night. None too happy at all. It's what my mum calls bad country. One word. She always told me to avoid this area if I could, saying that I'd likely be murdered or worse out there. And I've heard the stories too. Stories about people getting out their car to help a stranded motorist, only to be ambushed, robbed, kidnapped, and or murdered. Stories about strange lights and ghost killers and vanishing hitchhikers and crazy inbred hillbilly families. There are said to be hundreds of unreported deaths out there, people just vanishing out the face of the earth, never to be seen again. I've always avoided driving through those hills, but one night I found myself driving straight down KY52S instead of I-75S, straight into those hills, straight into their darkness. Around midnight I got a message from my mum that my dad had been taken to the hospital and that his condition was serious. I immediately jumped out of bed and into my car despite my mum telling me to wait until morning to drive down. I lived up in Richmond at the time, while my parents were down in Hazard. It's a little under a 2-hour drive via I-75S and a little over 2 via KY52S. That night though, I-75S was closed due to an overnight bridge reconstruction project, so I had to take KY52 southbound, and it goes through some pretty gnarly bad country. I figured nothing would happen, that it'd be a smooth yet anxiety-ridden 2-hour-ish trip, but there was this dread I couldn't shake boiling up in my gut, urging me to wait until morning, but I didn't. I couldn't. I had to see my dad. I got from Richmond to Irvine just fine, driving the winding road and the hilly terrain with ease, going faster than the speed limit. It was from Irvine to Jackson that things took a turn for the worst. First off, it was dark. Really fucking dark. And even with my brights on, they still only lit up the surrounding area. The constantly curving roads didn't help either. I found myself slowing down, having to navigate through the dark, around the switchback and turns, inclines and depressions, hoping to God I didn't run off the road or hit an oncoming vehicle. And the dread was at the forefront of everything now. Sure, it could have been exacerbated by worry for my dad, but there's something about those hills. Something evil. And I was really fucking afraid. The radio was dipping in and out, so I put in the CD and tried to drown out the fear with music. But after the first song, I turned off the stereo completely and drove in silence, all my senses on high alert. It felt wrong. It felt like I was being watched. Every so often I would see a light flash in the woods, like campfire but brighter. And I swear at one point between Crystal and Beattyville, there was this pale and hairless and huge humanoid running after my car next to the road. Swear I saw it in the rearview mirror. It disappeared into the darkness and the trees when I braked and spun around in my seat. 30 minutes out of Beattyville I saw a kid who was wearing a yellow shirt, blue shorts and a red jacket, hood up. Colours that reminded me of Superman. He wasn't wearing shoes. That bothered me. I flicked my brights down to their normal strength and slowed to a crawl, wondering what the hell this kid, who looked to be under 10, was doing out in the middle of bumfuck nowhere. I made sure my doors were locked, cracked my windows and asked if he was okay as I rolled towards him. He didn't respond. I glanced down at my phone. No service. Shit. I asked him if he was okay again, and he looked up at me quickly, making his head fall down. He was crying. I slowed to a stop and he immediately ran over, sticking dirty fingers into the crack of my windows, pounding on the door. He was screaming something about how they were hunting him and they were going to let the monster eat him and they were watching us now, waiting just beyond the darkness. At this point I was seriously freaking out, and I might have been screaming too. I tried to roll my window up while trying to not hurt the kid, but he wouldn't release his grip on my window. I think he was trying to break it. A bright light flashed onto us and the kid screamed even louder. Let go of my car and began running down the road, back towards Beattyville, and I'm ashamed to say, I took off. I was afraid I was going to die and become another statistic of these hills. In my rearview mirror, I watched as what looked like 3 men in hooded robes ran out onto the road. The spotlight one of them was holding was trained onto my car and hit the mirror at an angle that blinded me, but it looked like the other 2 were going after the kid. I blinked and looked back towards the road, speeding like a bat out of hell. I pulled off in Jackson and drove straight to the police station. 2 detectives and an FBI agent who happened to be working in town with a liaison listened to me with grave faces. When I was finished, the FBI agent thanked me and told me that a kid had gone missing the day before from a Bible camp near the Kentucky River. He said that's why he's in town in the first place. Apparently the kid and his friends were out playing hide and seek in the woods in broad daylight when he just disappeared. He was wearing yellow, blue and red like Superman. The strange thing is, his footsteps just stopped and the shoes were still there. It was like he was lifted off the ground by air. It was weird. Half a dozen cop cars with twice as many cops, the agent and a search and rescue team were dispatched to the area within minutes after me reporting what I'd seen. I drove to a local diner and ended up staying in Jackson until morning, making the 40-ish minute drive down to Hazard after the sun rose. After hearing why it took me so long to get down there, my mum was beside herself with panic, but she was glad I was okay, telling me I did what I had to do to survive, that I was brave and wasn't a coward. My dad ended up making a full recovery. If you're wondering if I do feel like a coward, if I regret not letting that kid into my car, the answer is a resounding yes. I do, and I am. It haunts me to this day, but don't know what would have happened if I stayed there any longer, and I don't know if either of us would have made it out alive. No trace of the kid was ever found.